Welcome back to the Outlaw Ranch, y'all. So I've been staring at this now for quite a while, and I have talked to a few of my buddies who know a heck of a lot more about welding, structure, et cetera, than I do. And it's time to probably make this a little bit more permanent. First thing I'm going to do, though, is because of this gap that I have up underneath here, I am going to cut those tacks loose on this one. I'm going to move this tubing up into here so that this bottom isn't coming into that radius there, so that we can get full weld, from this tube to this tube. Then I will come over here and recut this tube probably for length. Once I make sure that I get that fitting on this side as perfectly as I can, we'll go ahead and place it on the far side over there and see if it is going to work over there as well. Then I'll take this tube off, we'll bring it back over here to the welding table, and we'll make this tube here match it perfectly. Once that's done and it's tacked in to where I like it, we'll start working on this front one to do the same thing. Make sure that it planes in here a little bit higher so that we don't have such a big gap here at the bottom. We'll make this one and this one level with each other, do the beveling and everything that we have to do on that one, cut this one to length so that this is at a 45, plane it in here as best we can on this frame, check it on the other side, and if it works, then we're going to make the other tube identical to this one. We already have the notch and everything exactly the same as I showed you guys yesterday. So we're going to keep going with this. It just seems like I'm doing more standing around looking at this, getting answers from friends, buddies, brothers who know more than I do. And they seem to think it's okay. So here we go, full bore, stand by. Okay, folks, what I've done is I have taken that tube and I have notched and I've put it up a little bit higher. You'll remember that the bottom of this notch here was kind of coming in at this radius, and there was too big of a gap, too big for me to weld, and there's going to be some more bracing and stuff like that in here. So we're going to make do with what we have. So I moved it up. Come over here, put this level on my tubing again, something like that, so it's in the middle. Move this tubing up into place, and you can see it is not at a 45. But by doing that, it makes this notch so much nicer. It is nice and tight all the way around. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a digital angle finder, find out what angle this is at, and tack it in. Incidentally, I also went and held up the shock mount about where I think it's going to go here. This is the shock mount. It's just a big piece. It's going to come in about where this frame here starts to turn, and the tubing clears it. So this is where it's going to go. It fits up nice and tight. It barely clears the bed lip here, and so everything's going to fit nice and tight that way. I'm really glad I happened to think about grabbing that shock mount. Otherwise, to get this at a 45, I end up cutting this down in here a little bit further, and when I do that, this tube starts to get into the same real estate that those tabs that go underneath the frame are going to be into. So it's not going to be at a 45 anymore. I just need to duplicate this same process on the other side of the truck, and then the same thing up front. I'm really glad I checked that. I will also space that front one up just a little bit like I've done on the rear here. Make sure that it's level, from side to side, okay? check to see where it planes in here, and that shock mount should come in here just forward of the clutch linkage here. I think it's going to come in right around in here because that axle, it's moved way far forward right now just to give me some room, but that axle comes in about an inch forward of the center of this fender. So it'll be about in here. That'll be the center line. That shock needs to angle this way just a little bit so that at full droop, that shock wouldn't be any more than, say, like 5 or 10 degrees from vertical. We don't want that shock, going negative, okay? Same thing on the rear. So I'll go ahead and tack this back into place, duplicate it on the front, see how it planes out, and hopefully everything will work out with the front shock mount too. Stand by. Okay, folks, first things first, we got this planed in, and that is really nice. Nice, perfect bevel gap, and it is exactly parallel. Really nice there. Come over here to the notch. You can see we're tight at the top, and up underneath here, we're tight at the bottom as well. You can see that. So that is perfect. That is all nice, and even I could weld that. Here's the shock mount. The shock mount is going to go into the frame somewhere like that. You can see it's nice and tight to the frame. It barely fits there, and it clears our tubing. I'm really glad I happened to think about that shock mount. That probably saved me some headaches. So now I'm going to try and duplicate. I'll take a level line from here to here and get that front one to plane in at the same height as I have this rear one. And we'll go from there. Hopefully, this is all going to work. In fact, I might have to take and just put a little tack in here just to hold that tube there. Because as soon as I move that block, it's going to want to fall, which is going to pry this tack here apart, and everything's going to come crashing down. So I'll take a level it across, clean up, this tubing here with the grinder, and start making like this is going to be more permanent. I do like the way it looks. You have to forgive that left tube is too low, but I do like the way that's looking. I think this is the way to go. Stand by, folks. Okay, guys, so a trip into town, and I bought this all-purpose digital angle guide, so it will measure my tubing in degrees, and that should allow me to make sure that these tubes now are exactly the same, front to back, driver's side, passenger side, you name it, everything should be the same, since this angle here is no longer quite 45 degrees. And oddly enough, even though I cut that tube at 45 degrees, it is planing in perfectly. And this was cut at 15 degrees. It is planing in perfectly, but according to my bubble level, it isn't 45. So I'm going to get this new tool out of the case. We'll get it set up and see if we can't duplicate the rear and the front to being exactly the same. So stand by. Okay, folks. So the first thing I did is I went from the bottom of that tube with a level over to that side, and you can see that purple mark right there below where I was cleaning up the tubing. And with my new tool, you can see that that bottom tube is at 11 degrees. So that is what we're going to use to measure this front tube. We're going to make it the same but opposite, the 11 degrees going the other direction. Excuse me. And then we're going to find out where it planes in on this frame. We'll lift it up to wherever we need it to see where it's going to plane in here. Once we get it lifted up and planed in and I get it cut, I'll tack it real quick and see if that shock mount is going to clear. It just clears on the rear, and since everything is the same front to back, left to right, at least so far, I hope that that also means it's going to clear on the front. But there is a variance. So this frame and the way that it kicks up and then it kind of levels off, then it kicks back down is different than what happens up here. Up here, it pinches in a little bit, then it doglegs back out, but this angle is not the same as it is in the back. So we'll see where it lands and go from there. Stand by. All right, y'all. I've been at this tube now for a couple of hours. What I did at first was I took the saw as far as it would go. It's about 47-ish degrees. That wasn't enough. So, but it got me close. At least it got the long point right where it blends in here, okay? Then I took my tube here, and you can see just how much of an angle this is. Let me show you the other problem, gosh, before I forget. So the other problem is, so you'll remember that this frame doglegs right in this area right here, and it doglegs in, and then it gets here, and then it doglegs out. Well, during that process, this isn't flat. This is actually a hump right here. This is fairly flat, and then this is fairly flat, but this hump is causing problems. The other thing is this isn't flat. This actually tapers from the camera view here down towards the exhaust pipe, which is really making this tough to get that angle, because it's not just an angle this way, it's an angle this way as well. And it's an angle that I cannot effectively measure. So with this tube now, we'll grab the tube, come over here, try to set this thing in place as best I can. There we go, we got in there. We come up in here, and I'll try and keep my hand out of the way. And you can see there's just a tiniest little gap on my side, on the camera side here. On the far side, it is touching. And I don't know how to get that any better. This is also like 0.2 degrees off. I think it's 10.8. But now looking at it, especially through the lens of the camera, it looks like this long side here needs to get cut down just a little bit. It doesn't look like it's very straight. So I'll try grinding that a little bit more. Maybe we can get that last 0.2 degrees or whatever out of this. But folks, this has been several hours on this tube at this point. And I don't have, a good way of measuring this angle. I did use a piece of paper here. I'm not sure where I put it now. Well, anyways, I put a piece of paper and I went to where the short point was and where I thought the long point was, and then used a marker to kind of trace around it there. It worked. It got me closer. It still didn't make it right. So I'm going to try and take some off of this, see if I can't get this to fit just that extra 0.1 or 0.2 degrees. So stand by, folks. Okay, folks, I thought I'd just show you this real quick here. I'll bring this tube up. We are at 11 degrees. That is the fit. It's a little hard to tell because this part of the frame rolls, so it looks like there's a big gap there, but it is tight. And we have a tight fit there. So I nailed it. Here's the problem. The problem is the other side of the truck doesn't have quite that big bulbous bump in the frame. I'll take you over there and show you. So the frame is not exactly the same from side to side. You can see this is much flatter all through here. And in here it looks like it's even more flat. So while I would love to take that tube, overlay the other front tube, and make it an exact carbon copy, I don't think that's possible because this angle is a little different, and the frame, has that bump on the driver's side. It doesn't really have it as much on the passenger side. So I'm pretty sure this one, I'm going to tack this one in real quick, and maybe tomorrow I will start fighting with the passenger side of the truck, trying to get it to match the driver's side, front and rear. I'm not sure how else to do it. So stand by, I'm going to get this tacked in and I'll show you guys what I'm talking about. Okay folks, here we go. There is 11 degrees on that side. Pull that off, come over to the rear. 11 degrees on the rear. So everything is equal front to back now. I was pretty surprised at how much shorter this leg was on the front than it is the rear. And the reason for it is the frame doesn't kick up as high in the front as it does in the rear. So that explains why that one is shorter. Everything is equal. I have my level mark here for the bottom of the tube. It's in place. It's level with that tube. I don't know how to do this job any better. So I don't know if tomorrow, if I'll get around to playing with the passenger side and try and make it match with this one. The rear should be easy. I already have that done. That's right here. This is the front, and this is the one that's going to take a whole lot of work, just like this other one did. It took me hours to get that, but this should be the end of this video. Again, like, comment, share, subscribe, all of that stuff helps a tremendous amount, as does the views. And as you can tell, I'm just, right now, it's kind of a nickel and dime for buying tools. I had to buy this digital level today, but anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate each and every one of you guys, and we'll catch y'all on the next one.